Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Taped podcast, the most symbolic podcast in the world. We are your hosts, as always, myself, MickyT.
And me, Nostalgia.
And before we introduce the band that we're going to do and the guests that we have to admit something here. Admittedly, we know very little about death metal, but thankfully our guest today does. So please welcome today's guest, Robert Walton, the host of the Metal Meltdown.
It's me. Woo. I'm Robert. We're gonna melt this metal down.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it. That's the name of the show.
We really are. We really are. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk with us, because I'm very excited to do this episode, especially.
Dude, you're welcome. I'm pumped as fuck. I love Def. One of the signature death metal bands. That's arguably why they call it death metal, because Def did it best.
And that's exactly what we're here to do today. What did I say there? Oh my god. Today we're going to be doing a death worst to best.
Don't feel bad. I trip over myself every day. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I remember in your Slipknot video you called psychosocial psychosexual. I remember that.
Oh man, yeah, that's the Freudian slip of the fucking century right there. Yikes.
Oh, Christ, it really is. So,
oh boy.
So yeah, with that in mind, y'all know how our worst to best series goes. We rank each discography from worst to best. This discography, we have 7 albums. We have everything that the band has done, from Scream Bloody Gore all the way up to The Sound of Perseverance. We will not be including any live albums, EPs, demos, or any of that shit. Do not care about those, just the studio albums. And with that in mind, let's get right into it, starting at the number 7 spot. And in my opinion, Death's, I won't say worst, I'll say least best album. I'm probably going to get shit for this, but Scream Bloody Gore.
Oh. My number 7 pick is Spiritual Healing.
Mine would be Scream Bloody Gore as well, honestly.
Ah.
Okay, so Nostalgia, you can go last then.
Yeah.
So yeah, Death's debut album, Scream Bloody Gore, is, it's a very important record in the grander scheme of extreme metal, as it's often credited as one of the very first full-blown death metal albums alongside Seven Churches, and I absolutely respect it as, a part of death metal's formation. And while it may not be my favorite death album, it's still a very good one. A flawed record, but a good one nonetheless. The only negatives that I have with Scream Bloody Gore is that the album halts at one point in the middle with a set of tracks, while good, are a little bit redundant to me. Like, these tracks don't really have the most memorable riffs or core songs, and they come off a little one-dimensional, considering it's a bit of a 4-track run of redundancy. Not to mention, the album does feel a little bit boilerplate for me, which is a bit of a given since it's very early death metal, but, that's all I really have for the negatives, since I really like a fair amount of this album. Like, the instrumentation, for example, most of which was handled by Chuck himself, except for the drums. And sure, it may not be as technical or as progressive as some of Death's later work, but I'll be damned if I didn't say that fucking goes off anyway, with its nasty riffs, its killer solos, and its sinister leads. The riffage on this album at its best is just fuckage incarnate, especially with moments like the infernal death, denial of life, Evil Dead, and a lot of the writing and the guitar work definitely takes a lot from thrash metal, and much like a lot of early death metal records, but it doesn't take away from my enjoyability of the sheer intensity of the music itself. Chuck's vocals, while a little primitive, are fucking savage all over this thing. I like the drumming from Chris Reifert, and I think that the very raw presentation of the production adds to the ferocious aggression that Scream Bloody Gore is going for, and I fuck with it heavy. Outside of that, I don't have too much to say about it. I just think it's a fun album.
Damn, what do I even need to say? You hit the nail right on the goddamn head.
Thank you.
You bring up a good point with saying least best as well, because I think it needs to be stressed. Def is not one of those bands that has an undeniable stinker in their discography, unlike Metallica or Megadeth or Morbid Angel. All of their stuff is really good. Even their worst stuff is still really good, by not just by death metal standards, but by any standards. So while Scream Bloody Gore is my least favorite, I want to stress it's still a really well-made and produced record. There's a rawness and honesty to it that is incredibly endearing even all these years later, and the tunes just fucking slap, man.
Is that it? All right, nostalgia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I guess definitely stand by that. It's just a really solid record.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I went with Spiritual Healing, the band's third album, and it certainly feels like on this project the band has their eyes set on a more, technically impressive overall sound, akin to the material they would release later on in their discography. But while there's, plenty of great material here, there's also moments where I think the band doesn't really come together as fluently and as cohesively as they would on some of their best projects. Tracks like Loving Monstrosity or Spiritual Healing definitely live up to, the very, very high standards that Death would go on to set for themselves. But on the flip sides, there are also moments here where I think the band fails to create anything that lives up to those aforementioned moments. And even though the instrumentation here and the musicianship here is fantastic throughout, there's moments where the individual technical prowess of each instrument doesn't really come together as fluently as it does on albums, which again I'll talk about in a bit. It feels like a bit of a transitioning period between their more thrashy roots and their more technical progressive metal. The end of the more progressive and technical end to their career. It's still a good album. The band definitely don't have any duds in their discography. I do agree with you guys, and it's still an album that I definitely enjoy overall. But when comparing it to the likes of Symbolic or Human or even the Leprosy that came before, I just don't enjoy this quite as much.
Okay, fair enough. My favourite tracks from Scream Bloody Gore are Infernal Death, Denial of Life, Evil Dead, Zombie Ritual, and Sacrificial. My least favourite track is Regurgitated Guts.
God, do I have a favorite on this thing? Zombie Ritual and Evil Dead come to mind. I think, man, it's just tough because it's all still so good. I think I would agree that Regurgitated Guts is my least favorite track on this album. Yeah. It just feels like really one-dimensional, just like, yep, this is death metal. That's it. Yeah, that's all.
I heavily agree.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know, man. It's tough to rank Def sometimes because like it's all good, and you just have like favorites. Like even with Spiritual Healing, which I guess I'll talk about again real soon. It's like you're like right on the money, man. I just personally prefer that over this. Def's kind of fascinating that way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What are your favorite and least favorite tracks?
Yeah, on Spiritual Healing, my favorite tracks are Loving Monstrosity, Spiritual Healing, Low Life, and Killing Spree. And my least favorite track is Defensive Personalities.
Hell yeah.
Okay, moving on to the number 6 picks. I chose Spiritual Healing.
I chose Bloody Gore.
I chose Spiritual Healing. I think
okay, I'll go
me and Mick here, he's reading my mind.
Oh yes, the chemistry is here. Let's go. And Spiritual Healing, like Nostalgia said, it's a bit of a transitional moment in Death's discography to me. It pretty much takes what the band did on Leprosy and apply it to a bit of a cleaner yet beefy sound, but on my first listen to Spiritual Healing, I personally wasn't too intrigued by it, and if I had not given it more listens, then it would probably have been at the bottom of my list, but of course I listened to it a bit more in preparation for this, and it honestly grew on me quite a lot, and I genuinely think it's a great effort from Death. Like I said earlier, Spiritual Healing is taking Death's sound from Leprosy and evolving it into something a little different. You can slowly but surely hear the band become a bit more technical and a bit more dynamic on the instrumental front, which is very welcome since the instrumentation on Spiritual Healing is great to me. Chuck and James Murphy's guitar work feels like it's a little more complex and all the more killer. They also feel a bit more melodic in a sense, and that goes a long way with plenty of tracks on this album. The more clean production style lends itself well to the record, and the core songs in this album are mostly great, especially with moments like the title track or Low Life. Chuck on this album also seems to focus more on a socially aware angle lyrically, and at times some of the lyrics can just come off a bit like unintentionally funny to me, especially on the opening track, but I still, appreciate the topical change of pace, and Chuck vocally, as always, is pretty damn great in here, even if the mixing, it does feel a little bit weird. I really liked every single track on Spiritual Healing. It may seem cookie cutter on the surface, but I really like it. I think it's a tad bit underrated. I don't think there's much of a dud on it, honestly.
Oh, sorry. Is it my turn? Is okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was like, wait. I'm like,
Yeah, this happens. Don't worry about it. It's
we
fine.
still get confused.
yeah. Transition album's the perfect term for this because they're moving towards the more melodic, technical, progressive tendencies of like symbolic human individual thought patterns, but they haven't quite mastered it. There's still a little bit of that old school flavor kicking around. It does make for something a touch jarring on the very first listen, especially if you're like, you're getting into death metal and then you listen to this, and you're like, what the fuck is this? There's all kinds of different guitar parts and shit. The production is kind of weird too. His vocals kind of feel weirdly removed from the mix. But that aside, there's a lot to appreciate about the musicianship, the songwriting of this record. I really like that he's straying away from goresploitation and violence and the more cliche themes of death metal at the time. And he's dealing with mental health and more social issues. Televangelism is like, and his critique of televangelism is a pretty common thing across the record, which I like. It's definitely odd in some parts, but I do find myself coming back to it more often than something like Scream Bloody Gore. And there's so many tracks here that, despite the oddness, have stood the test of time. The title track, Killing Spree, just a lot of great numbers on here from start to finish. I think I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 in my personal reviewing video, which, I don't know, the title that it was. My brain's spinning right now. And I would stand by that. It's one of their weaker records, but still a damn good record, all things considered.
Hard agree.
Yeah, we swapped our rankings around a bit. I went with their debut. And, considering how influential this album was to death metal and, therefore metal as a whole, putting it 6th doesn't really feel right. But looking at the rest of their discography, it's just a testament to how great the band is. And, even 6th place is an album which I thoroughly enjoyed from start to finish. I have very little to complain about when it comes to this project. And, it's a very important, landmark in death metal history, and I absolutely appreciate it for that. It's hard to discuss or analyze this project without imagining yourself listening to this back in 1987. There really was not much you could compare this to. It was just so raw, so, angry, so just, infernal that, putting yourself in that mindset just blows me away. It's an album that has aged incredibly, I think. Even though, death metal was still in its infancy, and you can still hear a lot of thrash metal in this project, like you can in a lot of early death metal. It still sounds fantastic today. The production here is just very raw, very, as I said, infernal. It sounds like it came from the depths of hell. Chuck sounds fantastic. He's definitely my favorite frontman when it comes to death metal, and his vocals here are fantastic. And Death just established quite an identity for themselves right off the bat. They really, hit full swing first try. And this album is definitely just a behemoth throughout. It's a fantastic project, and again, just a testament to how fantastic the band would go on to be.
All right,
Hell yeah.
And with that in mind, my favorite tracks from Spiritual Healing are the title track, Low Life, Altering the Future, Defensive Personalities, and Killing Spree. My least favorite track would probably have to be Living Monstrosity.
I would say Living Monstrosity as well. It does start off the record on a weird and weak note, but man, everything else is so good. Fuck. Yeah. I'd say personal favorites of the title track and Killing Spree, but damn, it's all so fucking good.
My favorite tracks are Infernal Death, Zombie Ritual, Sacrificial, Torn to Pieces, Scream Bloody Gore. My least favorite track is Baptized in Blood, but only if I really have to pick.
That's what it's getting down to. Just like, oh god, I have to pick a least favorite. Ugh.
Yeah, literally. And going forward, this is all going to be a fucking stretch to me, because they have not missed on a single track on any of these albums that I have in the top 5. And of course, we're kicking off the top 5 now. And for my number 5 pick, I chose The Sound of Perseverance.
Ooh. This one sounds like a hot take, but I adore this project, so don't get annoyed. Individual Thought Patterns is my number 5.
All right, so I guess this is where we're starting to get a little bit more variety. My number five is Leprosy.
Damn.
Yeah.
I think we can keep the same order just to keep things.
Okay, so that me, Robert, then you.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay. The Sound of Perseverance, the final album in the Death discography, and I know Robert is very upset with me right now. I've seen the video. I'm so sorry. It's
okay. I definitely did not break a glass in my hand when you said Sound of Perseverance.
Oh God! And
there definitely is not blood on the floor as I frantically clean up the glass.
Oh fuck. Anyways, yeah, The Sound of Perseverance. It's the final album in the Death discography, and it's one that saw the band go out with a fucking bang, because not only is it a great album, but it's also one of the band's most batshit insane records in their discography. In a discography full of batshit insane records. This time around, Chuck Schuldiner basically decided to say, fuck it, we're going full prog metal, and it's going to be fucking insane. And that's exactly what he did. The Sound of Perseverance is arguably a full-blown progressive metal album, and because it's Death, of course it's great. I know there's a small sect of fans who just completely write off the Sound of Perseverance, since it's the furthest the band have strayed away from their tech death sound. It's so far removed from their earlier material, and, Chuck vocally is much more pitchy. But to that I say, go fuck yourself, you are wrong, and you are a complete fuck nugget.
Same,
and
10 out
I
of 10.
stand by that. I wouldn't call it a 10, but whatever. Anyways, yeah, the album itself, it fucking slaps from front to back. It's like the logical evolution from Symbolic, and I feel like the band have some great things to offer in this very flashy yet technical setting. Firstly, the instrumentals are fucking fantastic. The constant change-ups, the incredibly nuanced soundscapes, and the incredibly precise, dense and meticulous playing is nothing short of fantastic. It consistently kills and impresses with little in the way of anything underwhelming, and that results in a fun fucking album. Chuck's vocals are another thing that have, changed drastically, as he's much more pitchy and shifts from his growls to practically screeches, and while I can certainly get the distaste for this vocal style, I fuck with it heavy, and it only plays to Chuck's strengths as a vocalist. Like, look at the Painkiller cover on this album. His vocal range on that track is insane. And most of the time, he genuinely makes a lot of these tracks work alongside these instrumentals. What were you about to say, Robert?
That opening screech, I feel bad for the motherfucker that doesn't want to rage when they hear that.
I do. I honestly, I pity them. I don't have much to criticize this album for, and it fucking pains me to put it this low. But when it's in a discography that is full of incredibly consistent and incredible material, you really have no choice. It's just all down to preference. But, The Sound of Perseverance is great. It's a great last album that a band could have. And with that in mind, it fucking slaps.
Hell fucking yeah, it does. Hence why it needs to be higher. Anyway, no, like I said before, we're at that point where it's like, yeah, everyone, they're all great. It's hard to really argue. And same thing with Leprosy. It's lower on the list for me, but it's still a fucking great album. This album for me takes everything that Scream Bloody Gore did and just kind of elevates it to the next fucking level. Everything about this, from the production to the musicianship to Chuck's vocals and guitar work, it's just a massive improvement in every single way. The songs are pretty well polished, like they actually sound good, but they still pack genuine punch. They're still really heavy. They're still pretty gross and slimy, especially lyrically. It's still a very violent and nasty record. Chuck's vocals are great. The guitar riffs, they're actually kind of catchy at times. I find myself genuinely singing along to tracks like Pull the Plug, Left to Die, Choke on It, which have not aged a single fucking day. This kind of occupies a territory much like Altars of Madness from Morbid Angel for me, where I'm just like, say whatever you will about whatever other death metal was coming out at the time, you cannot touch these two albums. They define the old school death metal sound and remain some of the best. So yeah, it's just a great record. It's disappointing that it has to be low, but the band only has 7 albums, which means some of them are going to be lower, some of them are going to be higher. That's just the way it fucking works, unfortunately.
That's exactly what comes to mind when I'm preparing myself to talk about this. Because, despite me really enjoying the previous two albums, it's quite easy to rank these so far. But these next five is it? Yeah, five are just so close together in terms of quality that sometimes I have to grasp at straws a little, and I don't like using direct comparisons to others' albums to start my discussion on a certain album. But in the case of Individual Thought Patterns, as great as it is, because it is an absolutely fantastic record, for me personally, it does kind of live in the shadow of Human, an album that you'll find out soon I definitely regard as one of their better projects, where I think a lot of Death albums prior and afterwards would consistently push the band's sound further and in new directions. I think Individual Thought Patterns just kind of sees the band playing to their strengths and to the sound that they already established on Human, which is definitely not a bad thing considering both projects are incredible. But when I'm trying to rank these albums that I really like, and I'm having to grasp at straws, I just have to rank it a little lower.
All right, and sorry about that. You just cut off.
It's probably just
there for a second.
Yeah,
it probably is. Okay, so with that in mind, my favorite tracks from The Sound of Perseverance are Scavenger of Human Sorrow, Painkiller, Bite the Pain, Spirit Crusher, Flesh and the Power It Holds, and The Voice of the Soul. If I had to pick a least favorite track, I would have to go with To Forgive is to Suffer.
Fuck. I believe I mentioned Left to Die, Pull the Plug, and Choke on It when I said about best tracks, but as far as worst, man, the title track is a little bloated for my personal liking, but there's nothing objectively wrong with it. I'll go with that since we have to pick something, I guess.
My favorite tracks are Overactive Imagination, probably my second favorite Death track overall, to be honest. In Human Form, Jealousy, Trapped in a Corner, Mentally Blind, and The Philosopher. Again, if I had to pick a least favorite, I'd go for the title track.
Okay, moving on to our number 4 picks. I chose Leprosy.
I also chose Leprosy.
Woo!
Man, I know what I wrote down beforehand, but I'm we're at this point in the Def discography where it's oh man, but that's so good, and this is so good. Fuck. Damn it. I think I'll go with Symbolic. That's what I had written down. That's what I had written down, so that's what I'll stick with.
That stings.
I see.
It stings me too. How do you think I feel?
Okay, we're even now. Right. So I will just go in the same order. It doesn't matter at this stage. So Leprosy.
Yeah,
to me, Leprosy was the point where Death felt like a fully formed unit, and as a unit, the band made a studio effort that massively improved upon what the debut did. And as a result, we get an entertaining slab of old school death metal that is consistently fucking fantastic from front to back. In contrast with the debut, Leprosy definitely has a sound that maintains the brutality that the debut possessed, while going with a production style that feels a bit bigger and a bit more refined. And that in turn lends itself well to the ever-evolving instrumentation that the band members of Death showcased on here, as it's fucking killer all over this album. Every riff on this album is infectious as fuck, every solo is incredibly tight, and each song is just so damn entertaining and engaging. Obviously the band would get more technical as they went along, but that doesn't take away from the constant excitement and adrenaline that Leprosy presents us with. And it shows with the quality of tracks like Leprosy, Choke on It, Born Dead, and Open Casket, etc. Basically the whole album. Each song on this album is just incredibly powerful and ridiculously fun. And of course, Chuck Schuldiner vocals, as always, are fucking amazing. Some of my personal favorite Death tracks are all over this album's tracklist, and despite the fact that the album does tend to get a little samey, it makes up for it with some consistently great and cohesive material. I'm even struggling to find much to criticize about it, really, because this album is just such a fucking banger fest of extreme metal. Sure, it may be a little boilerplate, but who the fuck cares when the songs are just as fantastic as they are in this? It's great, but there's just a couple of others that I prefer.
Banger fest of extreme metal is a perfect term, if I may add. That's brilliant.
You can use that for one of your reviews. I am allowing you to. That's copyrighted.
I very likely shit. Do I got to pay you like a couple bucks or something?
No, I am giving you the copyright.
Oh, okay, shit. All right. All right, from here on anyone who says any one of those words owes me money. I like this. Man, where do I even start with Symbolic? At this point in Def's career, they have more or less become like a progressive death metal band. The technicality, I mean, it's there. It's still technical, but it's also smarter. The records are more intelligent. There's a lot more melody. There are lots of different twists and turns, and Symbolic, while not the best example of this side of Def, in my personal opinion, oh god, it's still a fucking banger, man. The title track, Zero Tolerance, Without Judgment, Crystal Mountain, Perennial Quest, just banger after banger with incredible music. I do think the production is a little weird at first. There's something about it that just always kind of hit me the wrong way. And I will say that because I don't own this on vinyl, I haven't come back to this as much as I'd probably like to. But these are like the definitions of fucking nitpicks. Like, none of that matters when the tunes slap, and all the tunes fucking slap here. I know that y'all are like, oh, what's the worst track? I don't think I can pick a worst track here. It's just a solid, like front to back, just a fucking fantastic record. If Def had 20 records, I'd feel more comfortable placing this higher, but they don't. So, what are you gonna do?
True.
Just like Mick, I went with Leprosy, the band's sophomore project, and I think this album stylistically is quite similar to the debut. It's very very much still has its roots in thrash, and it's just death metal goodness. It's not as progressive or technical as the band would go on to be, but it just makes up for all of that with just sheer power, energy, rawness. This album is just filthy from start to finish, and you put it well, Robert, when it comes to just the formative years of death metal. I think this project and Morbid Angel definitely stand out as the two highlights. It does everything that I love about that period of death metal perfectly. It takes what was great on Scream Bloody Gore and just adds upon it tenfold. The instrumentals here just are absolutely immense. They're powerful. The mixing is fantastic, and it definitely lets the just sheer depth and raw energy of the music shine. Obviously, not my favorite death project, and it wasn't one that I was expecting to be up high on anyone else's rankings. But I mean, it's just a very, very solid project. That I think belongs somewhere at the middle mark of their rankings, and I think everyone here agrees.
It's funny that you said it's funny you said you didn't expect people to have Leprosy too high, because I've met people where they're like, dude, fuck the prog stuff, Leprosy is where it's at.
And that wouldn't surprise me either, because it's such a fucking good album.
Oh yeah, I don't blame them or nothing. And just like this is one of those bands where almost everyone has a favorite album because they're all so good. It's just too hard to argue. There aren't really a lot of bands in general that have as perfect and as consistent a discography as Death.
Yeah, like one of my friends who's like a huge death metal nut. His favorite is actually Spiritual Healing.
Okay.
And I absolutely respect that.
More power to him.
Shouts out to my boy Lord. And with that in mind, my favorite tracks on Leprosy are the title track, Born Dead, Forgotten Past, Open Casket, and Choke on It. Worst track, this is probably going to piss a lot of people off, but I really like this track, but I decided to just pick one per album. I'm going with Pull the Plug, Sue Me.
Whoa!
I knew you were going for it when you said
that's the closest thing to a hot take we've heard this whole video.
Yeah.
I don't even
That's a popular song, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's one of their most streamed songs too, but it's just like, I don't know. I just prefer the other tracks, but at the same time, like, it's still a great fucking song, you know?
I don't think anyone's gonna listen to you beyond that point. Just like he said Pull the Plug's the worst. That's it. Cancelled.
Oh fuck. Right, my head is gonna be on a fucking spike. Watch.
# triggered.
Fuck.
Hey man, if I can get away with fucking talking smack about fucking Lord of the Lost, and calling psychosocial psychosexual, I think you'll be okay.
Okay. I'm
But then
sure I
again, what
will.
do I? Then again, what do I know? I'm an idiot, so.
Nah.
For my favorite track on Symbolic, man, I love Perennial Quest. I love the title track as well. Starts the album, one of the best like openings to an album I think ever. Just really starts it off on a really fantastic, super interesting note. I don't know about a favorite number, or sorry, a least favorite number. Fuck, I don't know. Um, maybe Sacred Serenity. Maybe that's a good strong maybe though in like big bold letters. Yeah,
It's in
that's
papyrus
it.
font.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite my favorite tracks on Leprosy are Leprosy, Born Dead, Forgotten Past, Left to Die, Pull the Plug, Open Casket, Primitive Ways. Least favorite, again, it's difficult. If I had to pick, I'd go for Choke on It.
Ah, that stings. Clears throat. Okay. Okay, next we're moving into the top 3, damn. And
Hell
at my
yeah.
number 3 pick, I'm gonna go with Individual Thought Patterns.
I'll preface this by saying, you can. I want to announce my last, actually.
Oh yeah. No problem. It's a man. This is a real toss up for me. We're coming down to like, damn. I literally had this written down, but now that we're here, it's like, do I really want to do this? I'm gonna go with Human. There's a very specific reason why Human is not higher.
All right. I'll just say that I shifted my rankings around quite a bit doing this. These next 3 were just impossible to rank. They're all pretty much on the same tier, in my opinion. And each one of these 3, for at least some moment in time, occupied my top spot. But with a heavy heart, I must announce that my number 3 spot goes to The Sound of Perseverance.
Discord cut off for me.
It cut off, but I know what
kept
album
talking,
it is.
It's fine.
I know what album it is.
Damn. Okay, so yeah,
same order.
Yeah, we'll do them in the regular order. So yeah, Individual Thought Patterns is a bit of a weird one in the band's discography for me, and that mostly boils down to the fact that Individual Thought Patterns doesn't really try to expand upon what the band achieved on the album that preceded it, Human. So it essentially is like Human Part 2, and for me, that reason isn't really a bad thing because Death once again hit us with an impressive and incredible album that's just banger after banger. You know, Steve DiGiorgio, I can't even pronounce these names. What the fuck? Steve DiGiorgio. Is that right? Steve DiGiorgio. What the fuck?
Oh. It's Delicio. It's not delivery, it's DiGiorgio.
DiGiorgio, okay. Was the only one from the Human lineup to stick with Chuck, so they were joined by Gene Hoglan on drums and guitarist Andy LaRocque. And while they don't really bring anything that feels all that new for Death, they still manage to deliver on some fantastic and exciting material. Now, the riffage, once again, is fantastic, no questions asked. The leads and solos are incredible, no questions asked. The drumming is once again very tight and incredibly fun, no questions asked. And Chuck absolutely sounds gnarly on this one, no questions asked. His vocals on Individual Thought Patterns sound a lot more furious this time around, and in contrast with previous efforts, like he sounded furious before, but like not to the extent that it was on Individual Thought Patterns. And you know, another thing I appreciate this album for is how audible and present a lot of Steve's bass is, since you know he goes off especially on this album, and and his parts especially stand out to me. I suppose Individual Thought Patterns is different from Human in that it applies its more atmospheric and you know, I guess progressive elements much more than its predecessor, but then again, that's a bit of a reach. Either way, the production, the instrumentation, and overall songs of this album are fantastic. Tracks like Trapped in the Corner and Destiny are easily some of the band's best songs, and the tracklist itself does not miss. It does not miss once, and I mean that. You know, I would say more about it, but I'd be repeating myself when I get to Humans, so for now, just know that Individual Thought Patterns is another amazing effort from Death. It's just fucking amazing from front to back. Production's amazing, instrumentation's amazing. It's all killer, no filler. Done.
Hell yeah. You're very much right about Individual Thought Patterns being human part 2, and also very much right on that not being a problem. Human for me is amazing for a number of reasons. Paul Masvidal, Sean Reinhart on guitar and drums, they're only 20 years old at the time, which is insane. I wasn't playing this kind of material at 20 years old. I was writing shitty ass fucking grindcore songs and, you know, barely making it to my fucking college classes on time. And these motherfuckers are just basically inventing technical death metal on this fucking album, which is insane to me. And what they're doing with Steve and with Chuck, you know, I mean, Cosmic Sea, Vacant Planets, Flattening of Emotions, Suicide Machine. It's some of the most intelligent material that Death have constructed up to this point, and possibly in general. The only reason this isn't higher is because of the God of Thunder cover, which I fucking despise. I just hate this. This is the one Death song where I'm like, I can't fucking stand this. I can't blame them entirely, because Kiss fucking sucks. So it's not like the original was that amazing. But like, I just can't. After such a triumphant finish to the album with Vacant Planets, you got this like lame ass fucking boomer rock song, and it sounds like ass, and they don't even sound like they're really into it. Like, it feels like an obligation. Like someone was like, we need to make the album longer, and it was like, oh, fine. And I don't want to hear the argument. When I did my reviewing every Death album video, it was like, oh, don't count the bonus track because it doesn't count. Really? Because last I checked, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but last I checked, Painkiller was like not the final closing thing to the fucking Sound of Perseverance. People still talk about it. Again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But regardless, it's whether it's official or not, I don't care. It sucks. It's on my copy of the album, that's good enough for me. The album is still amazing, though. Like, just turn it off after Vacant Planet. That's all.
Yeah, I don't count the God of Thunder cover in my thing, even though I do count Painkiller. Mostly because
totally fair.
I just fucking hate Kiss, so I don't want to bother.
This is turning into a fuck Kiss video.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, let's drop.
I mean, look, it's still an amazing album. Like, Human, if it wasn't for that fucking song, this would be a 4.5 out of 5 for me. Or it would be a 5 out of 5 for me. It's already a 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah. Fuck Gene Simmons.
I went with The Sound of Perseverance in number 3, an album which I think is just incredible from start to finish. And, you know, it was the last project released before Chuck's untimely death. And in my opinion, it definitely serves as like the perfect swan song to the band's career and legacy. And honestly, a victory lap of sorts for the band, as, you know, one of the biggest pioneers in metal over the last decade. They could have released anything, and they could have just played it safe, played to their strengths, but instead they do what is their most progressive, what is their most out there and just unique project in their entire discography. They definitely saved, you know, the most exciting stuff for last when it comes to, you know, reaching new territory with their sound. And, you know, this project is one of the most emotionally charged projects in their entire discography. It's one of the most melodic and just at times honestly beautiful albums in Death's discography. A word I wouldn't be using too often, but the instrumental work here is just spectacular. It's haunting. It's just some of the band's most ambitious instrumental work to date. The transitions here are just mind-blowing sometimes, and the ideas explored are always well executed. Chuck's vocal style on this project definitely adds a lot of emotion and power to these tracks. You know, his higher vocal pitch just sounds so pained, so anguished, and you know, when placed alongside these very just beautiful, ambitious, atmospheric, grandiose instrumentals, this album is honestly just haunting from start to finish. There's really nothing bad I can say about this project. And again, there was a time in my rankings where this was number 1, but things have shifted and there's projects that I just marginally prefer.
Okay. And with that in mind, my favourite tracks from Individual Thought Patterns are Trapped in a Corner, which honestly might be my second favourite Death song, Destiny, Overactive Imagination, Inhuman Form, Mentally Blind, Out of Touch, and The Philosopher. If I had to pick a least favourite, I'd probably go with the title track.
My favorites from Human would be Suicide Machine, Cosmic Sea, and God, Flattening Emotions. It's all amazing. Oh, except God of Thunder, which, by the way, in case it wasn't clear, is my least favorite track. I do not care if it's a bonus track. It sucks. It fucking sucks.
I don't think you were clear enough.
Oh, was I not? Should I say it again?
Oh yeah, please say it for the people. Say it louder for the people in the back.
Ladies and gentlemen, God of Thunder fucking sucks. Feel free to let me know if you need another take of that later. We can edit it in or something.
Yeah, I think I might just loop that for like an hour at the end of the podcast.
Fuck yes.
Yeah, my favorite tracks on Sound of Perseverance were Scavenger of Human Sorrow, Bite the Pain, Flesh and the Power It Holds, To Forgive Us to Suffer, A Moment of Clarity, Painkiller, and probably it's tied for my favorite death track, Spirit Crusher. And my least favorite track, again, if I had to pick, Voice of the Soul.
All right. We're in the top two now. We're at the last two in our picks. And fucking hell, this was so tough. Holy shit, man. My number 2 pick, what I think is the second best album in the Death discography, is Human.
For me, it would be Individual Thought Patterns.
I also went with Human again. It was very close.
Indeed. And despite what the album title suggests, Human does not sound like it was even made by humans, because it's such a mind-boggling and suffocating piece of technical death metal that just sounds hellish, and from the album's opening drum fills to the very end, it's absolutely remarkable and incredible. You know, Human was pretty much the perfect evolution from Spiritual Healing, as it basically mastered the technical elements that record was going for, but Human does it with much more consistency, and the end product is pretty much a record that is, you know, a near masterpiece. That is easily one of the band's absolute best albums. The production on Human is fantastic through and through. As expected, it's so damn heavy, but at the same time, it just suffocates you with how dense it is and how intense it can be. The intensity only gets elevated even further with how tight, technical, and musically phenomenal the compositions and instrumentation from the band are. This album easily had one of Death's best lineups, with Chuck, obviously, Steve DiGiorgio, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, fuck me, guitarist Paul Masvidal, and drummer Sean Reinhardt. And the latter of both are of Cynic fame, and yeah, they absolutely gave stellar performances on this thing. The guitar work is constantly exciting and ridiculous throughout Human. The riffage especially is killer, and there's some real depth in what Chuck and Paul did on here and in the guitars. You know, Chuck vocally once again is absolutely brilliant. He's easily one of the best metal vocalists ever. You know, the bass is really audible in the mix, which is always appreciated. And the cherry on top for me is Sean Reinhardt's drumming, which is phenomenal on this album for me. He's just so damn precise on this album. His fills are entertaining as hell, and the pummeling nature of it all is just ridiculous. You know, Human is also one of Death's most consistent albums, with an incredibly tight track list that does not have a single weak moment for me. Like, some of their absolute best songs are on this album, including, you know, Lack of Comprehension, Suicide Machine, which actually might be my favorite Death song, you know, See Through Dreams, and even the progressive instrumental track Cosmic Sea. So yeah, basically the whole album. You know, I could go on for hours about this thing, but I'll keep it brief. Shit fucking slaps.
Shit fucking slaps. Hell yeah.
Except God of Thunder, of course.
Except, yeah. I don't think that needs to be said again. Although if it does, then feel free to...
It's been set in stone.
Yeah. For me, Individual Thought Patterns is taking everything that Human did almost masterfully and does it masterfully. It's an advancement on everything about that album, from the production to the guitar work, to the musicianship, the songwriting. It is a shame that Paul and Sean have left the band to focus on Cynic, but man, the talent we get in their place is insane. I mean, Gene Hoglan's a fucking machine. And Andy LaRocque, who at the time, let's keep in mind, is known for being a more straightforward kind of heavy metal guitarist. Like, he's best known for his work with King Diamond. And he shows up to play with Def. He improvises like literally 99% of his guitar work on this album and knocks it out of the goddamn park. I would literally kill to see like a super group with Steve DiGiorgio, Andy LaRocque, and fucking Gene Hoglan. I don't care who's singing. Just get those three in a room and figure it out, because the chemistry that they have here is insane, and especially with Chuck. Chuck's lyrics are also very angry. They're very bitter. There's a lot of conflict within Def at the time. From what I understand, the manager, Eric Grief in particular, was having a lot of conflict with him, and they were having a lot of conflict with the record company. And a lot of this anger, this bitterness, just kind of gets to Chuck, and it comes out in his music. It's ferocious. It's unrelenting. I don't even know what else to say. It's just a remarkable album. And of course, on top of the lineup as well, we got Scott Burns producing, a death metal legend who's produced amazing records for Sepultura, Napalm Death, Obituary. He just knocks out of the park here as well. It's as close to lightning in a bottle as a band can get without fucking hurting themselves. It's just remarkable. This is almost a 5 out of 5 for me. I don't ask me to pick a least favorite track, because I can't. I really truly can't.
Yeah, I also went with Human, just like Mick. This album is just an adrenaline rush in music form. It absolutely puts the technical into technical death metal. The compositions and instrumentation here are so dense, so precise, and so insanely aggressive that it just almost feels like I'm drowning among the mix sometimes, and in the best way possible. The guitar work is out of this world. The drumming and bass work, always so tight, so powerful. Every single passage, every single tempo change, every single vocal line from Chuck absolutely just sent adrenaline throughout my entire body. It's one of the most powerful metal records I've ever listened to from start to finish. There's not a moment where it, slows down, where it lets you breathe. It keeps coming at you, and every single moment is just spectacular. There's a reason Death are so highly regarded in the world of metal as a whole. And the fact that, a project as incredible as this is second in my rankings is just, again, testament to that. I absolutely adore this project.
Alright, and with that in mind, my favourite tracks from Human are Suicide Machine, Secret Face, See-Through Dreams, Flattering Emotions, and Cosmic Sea. If I had to pick a least favourite track, I'm not going to pick anything from the original track list, because God of Thunder sucks.
Yes, we've all just agreed. Wonderful.
Yes.
God, there's, like I said, I simply can't pick a least favorite track on this thing, but I definitely have some favorites. Mentally Blind, Trapped in a Corner, The Philosopher, the opening cut as well, Overactive Imagination. I mean, it's all amazing, but those are like the best of the best in my opinion.
My favorite tracks are Suicide Machine, Together as One, Secret Face, Lack of Comprehension, See-Through Dreams, Cosmic Sea, and again tied for my number one favorite Death song, Flattening of Emotions. I don't have any of these favorites. I couldn't even grasp at straws here.
And we're at the number one picks. We're at the number one picks now. We're at the cream of the crop. And if it isn't obvious already, my number one Death album, my favorite one, is Symbolic.
Very nice. If it wasn't already extremely obvious for me, not just because of what I've said in this video, but also because of what I've said in the past on my own channel, my favorite is The Sound of Perseverance.
And my favorite is also Symbolic.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Well, then I will live on this mountain by myself then. Fuck.
It's a cool fucking mountain, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you ask me. Honestly, actually, Sound of Perseverance would probably be the first Death album I would get on vinyl just for that album cover alone. That thing is beautiful.
By sheer coincidence, it is the first Def album I got on vinyl, and it's as stunning as you think it is.
Honestly, I think Leprosy would be my favorite album cover from them, but fuck me. The Sound of Perseverance looks so fucking cool. I love it. It's my screensaver on my phone now. It looks so good.
Hell yeah. It's that like super bright red, like that blood hellish red contrasting with the black, and it just looks like a fucking voice crawling out of a mountain. It's just like, oh my god.
It's like the devil himself is just crawling out of that fucking mountain.
Absolutely.
Alright, now enough about album covers. Let's talk about the album, and I chose Symbolic. The stereotypical answer to the question of Death's best album. But do I care though? Not really, because Symbolic is fucking incredible. Like, there's a reason why it's the stereotypical answer to this question. It's basically just an absolute beast of some of the best death metal ever conceived. You know, to me, Symbolic was everything that the band were building up to from Spiritual Healing. It's where the band mastered the technical and slightly progressive aspects of their music, and as a result, they ended up creating a fucking masterpiece of extreme metal. You know, the band's lineup on the previous album, apart from Gene Hoglan, pretty much bailed on Chuck, but with the help of guitarist Bobby Colby and bassist Kelly Conlon, I cannot pronounce for shit again. What the fuck? He managed to piece together such a mind-bending album experience that quite honestly ascends beyond the boundaries of death metal, and it's all the better when the songs featured on this record are absolutely amazing. Like, come on, most of the songs in this album are peak metal. You know, the songs on Symbolic are clearly going for something bigger, as they feel way more lengthy, dynamic, melodic, and progressive. And to me, they all pay off, as we get some of the best and most consistent material that has ever come out under the Death name. The production on Symbolic is fantastic. It has the right amount of punch, and the mixes are just so pristine, it's unfair. The compositions just feel so nuanced and incredibly meticulous that it's insane. The attention to detail and precise musicianship is just mind-blowing to me, and it never fails to blow my mind every time I fucking listen to this thing. You know, Symbolic easily has some of Chuck Schuldiner best vocal performances and songwriting on any Death record, period. He sounds incredible, and I really appreciate how introspective the lyricism was from Chuck this time around. It kind of goes without saying, but instrumentally, Death, once again, kick fucking ass on Symbolic. The riffs are fucking killer from front to back. The solos and leads are fucking insane. The bass work is fantastic, and the drumming is just nuts. You know, the more atmospheric and progressive elements of Symbolic are done incredibly well, and the lengthier passages are just near perfection for me. You know, some of Death's absolute best tracks are on this album. Symbolic, you know, 1,000 Eyes, Without Judgment, Zero Tolerance. You know, I'll say it once again, basically the whole track list. Yeah, this shit is just phenomenal, to say the least. It's, you know, easily Death's best album in my eyes. It's the cherry on top of a phenomenal discography. Thank you, Chuck Schuldiner, you absolute legend. Rest in peace.
So, ladies and gentlemen, take everything he said about Symbolic, but now apply it to Sound of Perseverance, because that's the truth. That's the best one.
Oh yeah, objectively the best one.
Correct. That's a fact. No one argue. Look, I mean, at this point, it really is just like, dude, you can pick any album and no one will argue. I won't argue. If you disagree, great. But for me, this album, like, it just hits me in all the right places. God, their best riffs, the best production, the best vocals. They've never sounded this urgent, so emotionally charged. It's as if Chuck knew that this was going to be Def's last album, and one of his last albums in general. It's as if he knew, I'm on my way out, so I gotta go all the fuck out. He pushes his guitar playing to the next level, evident in tracks like Voice the Soul and Bite the Pain. He pushes his vocals to the next level, evident in Scavenger of Human Sorrow and Spirit Crusher and the monumental Painkiller. The production is so sharp, beefy, and just absolutely vicious. I could like shave my face based on how sharp those fucking guitars are. And it's just remarkable. There's not a moment of fat. There's not a single bit of filler. There's not a single second that I would trim from this or edit in any way whatsoever. The reason why I don't give out a lot of 5 out of 5s is because an album like The Sound of Perseverance exists. It is truly, in my opinion at least, a perfect album.
Damn.
He's just like, damn, I think he got me too. I think I changed my mind.
Oh, I'm not changing my mind, but damn, that was powerful. That was powerful opinions.
I went with Symbolic, which is definitely to a lot of people the big one in Death's discography. And as much as I occasionally like being a little different with my opinions, at the end of the day, I think it became clear to me that this had to be number one for me. It was definitely the album that I came back to the most. Definitely the album that I had the most enjoyment out of. And it's just, in my opinion, one of the greatest feats in metal history. By the time Symbolic came out in 95, Death were already a household name in the metal scene. And in the short 8 years that the band had, existed, they were far, far from where they were when they started. They had already progressed so far and so many times that, they were on, like, the sound of Symbolic is almost unrecognizable to a lot of what was heard on Scream Bloody Gore. Death's sound had slowly progressed into, what is, in my opinion, a culmination of all that was great about their previous releases. Symbolic is the band's magnum opus, in my opinion. It takes the best parts of, Death throughout their career and just turns everything up to the max. It's, technical death metal fine-tuned to perfection. It finds the balance between aggression and melody, technical prowess and raw energy, atmosphere and intensity. And to me, this album is just otherworldly. It's an album that, presents, in my opinion, the best of one of the best metal bands of all time. And, it delivers everything and delivers its punches with such just incredible technical prowess that it blows me away every time I listen to it. It's probably my favorite metal album of all time. I think I can safely say that. Yeah. That's
a solid album to make your number one all time.
Even in, I'm relatively new to the death metal scene. I've heard albums throughout the years, mostly just recent projects. I haven't really gone back to listen to the quote-unquote classics until recently. But, I've heard some amazing stuff, and out of all of them, this album is the one that I come back to the most, and this album just blows me away more than anything. It's honestly incredible.
I don't blame you. Symbolic is amazing. Rain and Blood will always be my favorite metal album of all time, so yeah, it's whatever.
God, I don't know if I have an all-time favorite metal album. It's just so many. Although I will say my all-time favorite album, like in any genre, is actually Appetite for Destruction from Guns N' Roses.
Shit, really?
Yeah, that just hits I will admit there's a little bit of a nostalgia boner, because this is like Guns N' Roses, like a childhood band for me. But even still to this day, man, I'm like, oh my God, just the perfect combination of riffs and melody and great production and everything.
All right, fair enough. And with that in mind, my favorite tracks from Symbolic are Symbolic, Zero Tolerance, Empty Words, 1000 Eyes, Without Judgment, Crystal Mountain, Misanthrope, and Perennial Quest. And I have no least favorite tracks.
I have Bite the Pain is a song that like literally is constantly looping in my head. So I guess that's probably the favorite, but goddamn, it's all good. Like I said, there's not a single moment of fat or filler whatsoever. Pick any song on this album, you will have a blast. They're all my favorite.
I can't do this. My favorite tracks are all of them. My least favorite are none of them.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yes. And with that in mind, we did it. We ranked the entire Death discography. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure having you on board with this.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. I never say no to talking about good music, man.
Fuck yeah, dude. And with that in mind, you want to shout out your channel and your socials?
Oh yeah, I'm on a Metal Meltdown. That's me. That's what I do. We do streams and album reviews and interviews, and sometimes there's a fucking plush alligator that the subscriber base has fallen in love with. His name's Chompy. You can find me on the Metal Meltdown on YouTube, at the Metal Meltdown on Instagram. There's also a Facebook page, but like, I'll be honest, I never fucking use it, so just go to Instagram.
All right.
It's
No, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, sorry, no, nothing. I got nothing. I am A-OK.
All right. All right. So, thank you guys so much for checking out today's episode of the Taped Podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed. What are some of your lists down below? Let us know what your favorite Death album is, what your least favorite is. Who do you agree with the most as well? Of course, be sure to check out me and Nostalgia's socials in the description to our own individual channels, as well as our Rate Your Music and Album of the Year pages. Of course, a lot of people watching this are going to be death metal fans, but I suppose in the next coming weeks we have another genre essentials list coming out, and it's going to be on death metal, so you should stick around for that one if you would like to. Ooh. And yeah, with that in mind, my name has been MickyT.
I've been Nostalgia.
Oh, and I'm Robert Walton from the Metal Meltdown.
See ya.
Peace.